Welcome to another of our Yorkton stories, our look at Yorkton and area people and events, past and present. My name is Dick DeRike. Our podcasts are available on our website, yorktonstories.ca, where you will also find photos, links, and other information associated with this and previous podcasts when available. You can not only hear the stories, you can also see and read information about the podcast topics. We can also be found on all major podcast directories. Search for Yorkton Stories, and you will find us. We say thanks to our premier sponsors, Harvest Meats and Grain Millers, both here in Yorkton, and others who assist us in many ways. Kristopher Grunert was born and raised on the family farm a mile north of the correction line along Orkney Road, just northwest of Yorkton, the son of Gordon and Debbie Grunert, and a younger brother of Michelle. The family lived on land first established as the Grunert homestead in 1888. His parents and several other Grunert families still farm in that area. Farming, however, was not in Kris's future. As a teenager, he developed a keen interest in skateboarding, then a relatively new sport in Yorkton, which led him to Vancouver on a bit of a pretense. We'll let Kris tell that story. But that pretense did lead to a career and wide recognition in the field of photography that now spans 25 years, in which time he has won numerous international photography awards. His work has been included in exhibitions in Vancouver, Beijing, Osaka, Japan, Los Angeles, London, England, New York, Brussels, and Berlin. In 2012, he also had a solo exhibition of his work in, Yorkton, at the Godfrey Dean Art Gallery. His clients have included such familiar names as Adobe, Canadian Pacific Rail, General Electric, Teck Mining, Google, Gucci, Nike, and WestJet, to name only a few. He has worked with top architectural firms, including the Pei Partnership Architects, owned by the son of renowned Chinese-American architect Yo-Ming Pei, that's spelled P-E-I, and Kris's work has appeared in publications ranging from BC Business to the Wall Street Journal. The creative director of DDB Canada, one of Canada's largest advertising agencies and now part of Omnicom Advertising Group, said this about Kris's work. Kristopher has the gift of being able to find beauty in things most of us take for granted. It's through his eyes you can find a deeper appreciation for the world around you. The Director of Marketing and Communications for CP Rail said this: CP first hired Kristopher Grunert for a one-time internal photo shoot through an agency in late 2012. Little did we know that he would go on to help us completely revitalize our corporate image with his unique perspective on railroading. High praise from high levels of the corporate world. Kris is widely recognized as a photographer who uses his talents to create a bridge between humans and technology, in the process creating mysticism around both mountains and machines. We talked at length about both his commercial and personal work, how that all came about, and how he sees himself as part of that process. You can view some of his work at yorktonstories.ca, where there are also links to websites showing much more of the work he has done around the world. Until last winter, Kris worked out of Vancouver, but in December, he and his wife moved back to Saskatchewan, to Regina, where they reconfigured and expanded their business. To many of us, a move from Vancouver back to Saskatchewan might seem counterintuitive, but Kris had a good reason. We'll let him explain that as well. So, back to the beginning. You grew up in Yorkton, you were into skateboarding, and you wanted to be a skateboarder, so you went to Vancouver soon after finishing school.
Yes.
How does a farm kid from the Orkney district get interested in skateboarding? Because you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, we were the first kind of generation of skateboarders here in the city. It was, I guess I would have to thank satellite television. That was in the 90s, like
Yeah,
satellite TVs
yeah.
became a thing. And actually, I first stumbled upon a TV channel that was dedicated to surfing. Here I was, I guess, 14, 15, and I found this channel on surfing, and I had never probably even seen that prior
Yeah,
to
there's
that.
not a whole lot of surfing on the prairies, is there?
No, and I was just like, wow, like these waves and these guys on the waves. And I was, I just became really quite amazed by it. And so I think that was probably my first introduction to that idea of standing on a board, being so curious and intrigued by that. And then I might have kind of hit on snowboarding before skateboarding. It was, again, that was very, very new. And I think it came through the TV, just sort of seeing a snowboarding competition on one of these sports channels and thinking, okay, well, I think maybe I could do that one because I know that we have Mission Ridge and these other
Yeah.
ski hills around. And I got my hands on probably one of the first snowboards ever. And my dad would pull me behind the snowmobile because that was kind of like the easiest thing to try it out. And I don't know, I just love that idea of the feeling, I guess, just the feeling of going with the flow, which I think is what I saw on that the surfing. Like those guys,
Yeah.
like there's no specific line that they take really. Like it's every individual choice that they make. So yeah, it was snowboarding and then skateboarding. My grandparents that lived right next to us on the farm, they had like this small concrete pad, which was like, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. And I would just like roll around on there. And I do remember my grandma like, why my wheels were making marks on the concrete. When I moved from Simpson School, like grade 6 to grade 7, then I was kind of mixed with the city kids.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of other guys that were into skateboarding. And so that's kind of how I got into it and then kind of went into that group. Really early days, there wasn't much of it around, but we'd get our hands on these tapes of these guys, I guess, down in California or wherever. And we would just like watch them endlessly. And I think it was just so far removed from what was around me on the farm that it kind of provided this thing, like this thing that was different. But, growing up on a farm, it was me and my sister, and our closest neighbors were just like a mile away, and they had a boy that was my age, a daughter that was my sister's age. So I had this like social connection, which was really nice. But I spent a lot of time on my own, like just on the farm, like watching the clouds and seeing the airplanes fly over, and having this curiosity of like there's something further, and also my mom has family in BC. So almost every summer we would do a road trip to BC. So I had this awareness of the West Coast, of Vancouver, of the mild climate. Yeah, when I was in high school, we would skateboard in the summer and then you wouldn't skateboard for 6 months. So you'd kind of lose everything that you learned. And it was kind of frustrating because it's a really, really difficult sport. I think that's also what drew me to it is that it's really challenging. Anyways, yeah, this awareness of BC and the milder climate, and so I was in high school, and I remember going to the principal. I was like, okay, yeah, I would like to see how fast I can move through this high school so that I could get there. And he's like, well, Kris, he's looking at my grades. I mean, they weren't bad, but they weren't like exceptional. So he's like, well, just be patient and you'll get there. And I kind of knew, once I graduated, I was going to save up enough money to make that move. And so that's what I did. So yeah, right after high school, I continued my job at Canadian Tire, worked away at the cashier or in the hardware department, and saved up, enough money for that move to do on my own, and moved with one other friend there. And it was pretty clear once I got there that I'm probably not going to be a professional skateboarder. Like, these guys they're born with something that is kind of exceptional. And this actually takes me back. So at Canadian Tire, after working for 6 months, I gave my notice, and And one of the other managers was like, "Oh, Kris, like I heard that you gave your notice and you're moving to Vancouver. Like, what are you going to do there?" I didn't want to say that I was going to go there to skateboard because I honestly don't know why I said that. I said, "Oh, I'm going to go to Vancouver and study photography." And and then I honestly didn't think about it. I moved to Vancouver, worked retail or a few odd jobs, well, probably 6 months. I was like, okay, well, I probably really need to do something with my life. And I didn't know what. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was completely open. So I went to the Vancouver Public Library, found this book, which was actually the Encyclopedia of Occupations, really thick, right? It went from A to Z, and I started from the A's, and I just kind of kept flipping. But it probably took a couple hours, I'm sure. I was sitting there and I got to the P's, and then I saw photographer, and I was like, and there was like a whole, 2 pages about the photographer, all these different types of photographers. That's what reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, I said that I was going to study photography, but I didn't even really know that could be a job, honestly, until I sort of saw it in the book and read all about it. And so the next day, I literally drove to all the different colleges and universities around Vancouver. I remember going to Emily Carr and UBC and Capilano College and seeing like what they have for photography programs. And then I came across Langara College, and the director of the program just happened to be in her office that day. I introduced myself and I told her that I'd like to join the program. And she's like, "Do you have a portfolio?" I didn't even know what a portfolio was, really. I was like, well, no. She's like, do you have a camera? Like, actually, I didn't even have a camera at that point. I just knew that this was like something that I wanted to do. She gave me that look, which I can still imagine, that sort of smile, and she could see like I was really keen and stuff. And she's like, what I suggest is that you look at the night classes, see if you like it, and build your portfolio. And then once you've done that, you can bring that back to me and I'll tell you more about the program, kind of thing. So I did all that. I was accepted into the program, and it was a 2-year photography program. It was really technical, like probably more technical than I've even been since then. I think my photography is a little bit more, probably less technical than some of my colleagues. There was this last assignment of the first year, and it was called Industrial Picture Story. And that was like the first assignment where we were sort of given creative freedom to do whatever we wanted within the realms of it being an industrial kind of picture story. So we were told to contact a company or some place and do like a photo essay. And there was this oil refinery there that I drove past all the time at night. How those places just glow with all the lights, and even during the day, it just looks so interesting. And so it was just kind of on my mind. Okay, well, that would be a place that I could contact. And so I did, introduce myself and said I was a student, and we had this assignment. And they're like, yeah, sure. Like, they were very welcoming. They welcomed me into the oil refinery for the day. They put me through the safety orientation and gave me coveralls and hard hat, and really enjoyed that process of exploring and learning. One of my friends, he brought corporate annual report to class. It was actually a Finning Caterpillar annual report. And he brought it to class to show everyone, like, oh, this is industrial photography. Like, look, I found this on my dad's bookshelf. I guess this is industrial photography. And it was like beautifully designed, printed on incredible paper. And it was all black and white photographs, like fine art quality, black and white photographs of Caterpillar equipment, in the Arctic and like the mines. And I was just like, wow, like this is really cool. Like this is what I wanted to explore. And I knew at that time, like this is something I would really like to continue. Yeah. So I did. I just kind of kept going with it.
What was your first big job? What was the one that in your mind got you started?
I mentioned that Finning Caterpillar annual report that my friend brought to class. And that really stuck with me. And it was probably 3 years later, like I finished college. I worked with a photographer for a year as his full-time assistant. He was really busy. I was really focused on, supporting him. And then at some point I realized I needed to go out on my own and take my own photographs. I still remembered that annual report, and it was actually produced in Vancouver. I remember researching, finding out who did that original annual report, and I think I called them up and made a meeting with them to show them my portfolio, and didn't really mention that annual report until I got there. And they were like, "Oh, we don't actually have that account anymore, but you should, if you're curious about that, you should talk to this other company." And so I did. And so I don't know that was like the very first assignment, but to me, like that was like, so anyways, I went to that other company. I told them about this annual report that inspired me. And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, we just finished that project, but we're working on this other one that maybe you're interested in. It's for a mining company. They were called Placer Dome at the time. And if you're interested in that, maybe we can work together." So I did this like first mining assignment up in Northern Ontario with my Hasselblad. It was like Northern Ontario. And like, growing up in the prairies, cold temperatures, nothing new in the winter, but wow. Whoa, Timmins, Ontario. It was minus 52 in the morning. I was like, oh my gosh, this was the day that we were going to be taking photographs in this open pit mine. Luckily, I had the Hasselblad because that was completely manual. But even my light meter that I would use to, judge the exposure, I'd have to keep it in my armpit, to warm it up and then take the reading and then take the shot. So that was like my first industrial assignment, first big assignment, which was involved traveling, across the country. And it was just so exciting to be in that cold weather. And then we did go underground, and that was my first time also being in an underground mine, which was fascinating to me. And so we got that one under the belt. And then the next year, I got that the finning caterpillar assignment, which was really a big milestone for me because like that was so cemented in my head since college. And that one involved going to the UK, where they also had facilities and distribution centers, and then down to South America to Chile, which finning also operated in. So that was the first international assignment that I had. It was awesome, but it was also challenging. It was a bit of a wake-up call to me because it was like we got to the UK and it was just raining like nonstop, and it was dark and gray, and I somehow had to do these photographs of these machinery and somehow make them look awesome. Luckily, they stuck with the sort of black and white theme of the photographs. In the end, it wasn't bad, but it was pretty stressful as first international assignment. So just had to kind of push through and got through it.
I asked Kris how his personal photography, where he can basically give free rein to his creative processes, meshes with his commercial work, which obviously has a very specific purpose, which has requirements and expectations set by the client he's working for.
It was something that I always, like a challenge to me, because I always had this more personal work and then this more commercial work. The personal work where I would just go out and explore the city. At this point, after college, I did like the tree planting thing one summer to save enough money to buy a Hasselblad. And so then I had a Hasselblad, and that was like my baby. And then I would just go out and explore the city with my camera, often at night, creating all this personal work. And then I would get these like commercial assignments. And to me, yeah, it was always a challenge because I had this body of work, which was very personal, and then this other stuff, which was very kind of commercial. And, everyone that I talked to, like these sort of consultants and people that help photographers build their career, they were always like, show your personal work. That's how you'll get the commercial stuff. I've always enjoyed the commercial work. Like it's more fulfilled that sort of need to just explore. But honestly, when I think about it, now that you ask me, I did this exhibit here actually at the Godferdine Art Gallery, curated by Don. He was the first one to really see my commercial work, like this industrial stuff, and wanted to put it into the gallery as art pieces. And actually, to me, that was a real milestone. The commercial and the personal, to me, it always was the same. It was the same process of just going out and exploring, but there were two very different results that people just categorized. But so for me, when I did that exhibit, which we titled As Above, So Below, it allowed me to finally blur those lines between the two, in my own head at least. So, that kind of bridged the two things in my own head, and I guess for others who saw the work as well. Photography is always, it's been more about the process of taking the photograph than the photograph itself. So even though that commercial work that you see for these large industrial companies, to me it was very personal. I approached it the same way in most cases. The spiritual stuff, would have came about during COVID, when all that commercial work just disappeared, overnight. Essentially, whatever projects I had just got put on hold. Like a lot of other people, I had time to reflect on myself and my own practice, and had time to spend. I've always had this sort of spiritual side, growing up in the family that I had, there was always this awareness of religion and spirituality. And I somehow got interested in meditation because I guess I had time to do it. And I actually started to do that on a daily basis. It wasn't really like meditation. It was more like a breathing practice that I started during COVID. Wim Hof breathing, which is this method of essentially taking 30 big breaths and then holding your breath. And it's supposed to be very healthy. And after doing that for, probably a few months or something regularly, at some point it just kind of hit me wow, I think this whole concept of meditation, everything I was reading about meditation and this awareness and mindfulness and this is really kind of what I've been doing with photography, just being in the moment, being out in the world, being in the actually present moment. Because when you're taking that photograph, you're looking through the viewfinder, you're capturing the present moment. So there was this awareness.
Freezing time.
And so I kind of just, at some point it just hit me oh wow, this whole meditation thing, I think I've been basically meditating or being in the present moment when I've been out on assignment or when I'm just out exploring the world. That is meditation, in the sense of being aware of the surroundings and being in the present moment. And so that got really interesting to me, and I started to really look at my own self and then figure out what is it that I do? What is this process that I do when I go out and take photographs? And I just kind of deciphered that for myself. I would look at photographs that I was most proud of or had most connection to. And I was thinking about those times when I was creating them. And it was okay, well, what was I doing? I was letting go of expectations. So I just go out and explore, or I didn't really have this specific image in mind that I wanted to create. I would just let go of expectations, engage that curiosity, which I knew I always had, ask myself questions about the things that I would see, whether it's me exploring on my own or for an assignment, an industrial assignment. I was always curious, asking questions what is this? What does this do? And I think that even just by asking questions, it kind of puts our brain in a different mode, right? We're now in inquisitive mode, which is different. It's a different state of mind. again, looking at these photographs that I created, and I'd remember how it felt. Like I'd remember that if it was super cold or if it was warm. I could remember some smells that were associated with it. Like, sometimes with industrial processes, there's strong smells. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And also sounds, right? There's like, in these industrial places, there's a lot of sound. I was really engaging all of my five senses, even though I was like taking these pictures. You could not be aware of the sounds or the smells. And then I realized, well, that's actually also a key component because our senses like connect us to the world around us. So when you kind of become aware of them, it just strengthens that connection. And then it comes back to the light. That has always been the true fascination for me is just seeing the light. And that's really what I learned in college. And then even after college, working as an assistant for a photographer. He was primarily a natural light photographer, an architectural photographer, but used all natural light. So he was really dialed into that, aware of the light. And so photography for me, like when I'm creating that picture, I was always really focusing in on the light and the quality of it. Light is this thing which is everywhere. It reveals our entire existence. And photography, when you really boil it down, like that's what it is it's drawing with light, right? That's the definition, I think, of photography, is drawing with light, the original definition. And so just this awareness of light. And I find that when you really focus in on that, and you've done these other things, like got yourself in that inquisitive mode and consciously became aware of what you're smelling and hearing, and then you focus in on the light, the world then disappears around you. And it's just you and your camera, or you and your subject. Time is somehow dissolved. You're capturing time, but you're not really aware of it because you're focused on these other things. Yeah, once I started kind of realizing these things and learning more about meditation and what people are kind of looking for or feeling or trying to achieve, or these concepts, I was like, wow, like photography has taught me a lot in a very different way. It's hard to not have gratitude at the end of all of that because you've learned about it. You have this appreciation for the process or the person that you're photographing. So that feeling of gratitude would just also built into just the process of taking the photographs or doing the assignments. For me, it was to kind of decipher all of that and realize that it was pretty special. And then being able to share that with people and all those things, hopefully some of those things come through the photographs and people feel that connection or that curiosity or the awareness.
Do you use any light other than natural light?
I certainly have for certain assignments and things that I've been asked to do. I sometimes, but it's pretty rare. There's something about using what's existing. I think it does feel really authentic, and the idea of being in a studio, it's different. I have colleagues that do that, and they just love it. They're really focused in on the light. They obsess about that, so they do these incredible product photographs or portraits, and they're really about creating the light, to create these perfect, beautiful photographs. And I have huge appreciation for that. It's a very much more technical. I don't know. I've just always gravitated more towards accessing my intuition, I guess, and just trying to place people in the right place at the right time and just using what's around us. There's no right or wrong. Yeah, I'm definitely more drawn to the locations or the outer world.
We talked about a trip he made to Dumont Dunes in the south end of Death Valley in California. It is an inhospitable place, as the name might imply, that captured Kris's imagination, which he then captured with his cameras.
2017, I had the opportunity to to host at a friend's house down in Los Angeles. And I had the time to do it for the month. And I thought, okay, well, I'll take like a week ahead of time and I'll drive down there and take my time. Mm-hmm. And I kind of pre-scouted all these, interesting things to see sort of along the way from Vancouver to Los Angeles. There was this one place that I wanted to go to, the Eureka Sand Dunes, which is like this Eureka Sand Dune, which is on the northern part of Death Valley. And it's apparently the largest sand dune in North America. This massive sand dune. It has a really interesting quality. Apparently, we've heard of like the singing sands. It's something that happens in this particular place. I mean, I guess other deserts as well, but apparently it's like just the humidity and everything. And if you stand on top of this dune and you kind of create a bit of a landslide, or you push the sand down, the sand, as it's rolling over itself, creates this like sound. That's what I read about on the internet. And I was like, I've got to go there. I've got to go there. And that was kind of my like destination. And, I kind of worked my way there. I was in the little town closest to it, and I was at the local kind of restaurant, and people were very friendly. They just asked, "Oh, what are you doing in town?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to go to Eureka Sand Dune tomorrow." And they're like, "It's just you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Yeah, it's called Death Valley, right? Like it's really dangerous place. And they just found that family that was, I don't know, they found a family that was maybe lost for like 20 years. They just found like their car and whatever. I was like, oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I've got water and everything, and I've got a sort of a 4x4. And they're like, okay, well, be careful. And so I go, I start my journey. It was a few hours drive from where I was, that closest community. It was still like 3 or 4 hours. Halfway there, you do lose your cell phone connection. I still had satellite kind of connection, so I could still see myself on the map, and ended up on, started going off the road down the trail, kept going. There was like kind of a storm a few weeks ago that it rained really hard, and there was a couple like washouts. And I went through one of them. I had a 4x4, and it wasn't too bad. I went through one of them. I think I went through a second one, and I got to this third one, and I knew on the map, like I couldn't see the dunes, but it was like through this valley, like through this corridor, around the corner. It was not far away. It was just over there, but there was this washout, and I was just like, oh man, like I know I could get across this, but I'll probably should dig out some of the, make it an easier pass. And I was just standing there, and I could see there's like a storm kind of brewing over to the right. And I'm like, whoa, those clouds look pretty dark. I'm like, gosh, I don't know, like if I had to decide, because it was probably another 5 minutes around the corner. And I was just looking up, and I swear to God, a single snowflake. This was in April, and a single snowflake came down in front of me. It was like coming down so slow. I put out my hand, and it just like landed right on my finger. And I was like, okay, I guess I better turn around, because if I were to keep going and this storm is like, it's not going to be fun. And, what if I can't get out? So anyways, I turned around defeated, because I really wanted to go, but it was clear that it was not the right time. So then the next day I go back on the internet, and I kind of looking for other dunes. And then I found this other place called Dumont Dunes, and it's on the southern tip of the Death Valley. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go there. It was amazing. There was a blacktop highway that just went right there, and it was like this regional park that you put like $5 in a mailbox kind of thing, and you could camp for 7 days. And they just had outhouse facilities, which is all they had. But it was like this beautiful desert with these like actually really large sand dunes as well. And I just spent 3 days there. I had food and water, and just me and my camera, and just watching the the light and the sand shifting, and there was very few people there. And that was, to me, like the most incredible experience. And I was very fortunate that I had the time to do that. But for me, to really just connect with the environment, it was just me and the sand dunes, and the light was constantly changing, and the wind was, you could just see it shaping these dunes. And honestly, that was probably my favorite little personal assignment. The ascension of Dumont Dune, is the photograph
on your NFT
that came out of that. Yeah. I've done all these nighttime photographs and used sort of long exposures to kind of create like painting with light. And I've always been quite fascinated with that. And I did have this general idea of using my flash at night and flashing my flash and creating a sort of line or a journey, kind of capturing footsteps. Kind of had that idea, like I wanted to go up this dune and capture the journey along the way. And just, spent 3 days there, got really familiar with the place, finally decided where I wanted to do this. And on the third night, I set up my tripod. I programmed it so it continuously took 30-second exposures on the tripod. And then I went at the bottom of the sand dune and then walked up the side of it, and basically every 3 steps I just flashed my flash, and it was completely dark. What could go wrong, really? The temperature was perfect. It was like 21 degrees, at 10 p.m. and it was just so perfect. Every 3 steps I flashed the flash, got to the top, and then came back, and then that's the photograph that you see there. A journey from point A to point B has also, I think, always been something that I've been aware of in my life. Even those road trips as a kid, right? Like starting here and going there, and that awareness of that. And so that's what this photograph is really trying to capture, is that journey, and that, that it's really all about the journey, in life. It's not really about where you get to or even where you start. It's like that journey is everything.
You've pretty much been all over the world since. What areas have you missed? Because I see pictures from China, Macau, rainforests and desert. Like most of us have kind of an idea of, I'd like to go there. Is there a place that you haven't been that you'd still like to go?
Probably many places, but I remember being in grade 1 and just like being so curious about the whole like Egyptian pyramids and that whole world. And I'm still really curious and interested in that part of the world. I've never been to the Middle East at all. I would love to go. I don't know which country there, but I'm very fascinated by the history of it. It's just such an old civilization, and some of the oldest architecture, but then also some of the newest architecture. They were just pushing the limits, like there to the next,
Dubai and
in Saudi Arabia. I mean, these towers that they build are they're really, really pushing the possibilities of what we can build, which is fascinating to me. I'm always interested in, what we build and design and create, and I love to see those buildings, tallest buildings or the biggest. I would love to go to the Middle East at some point.
Kris and his wife Mar are now back in Saskatchewan. Well, Kris is back, but for Mar, who comes from much warmer climates, it is her first venture here, and it started in the cold of December of 2024.
I didn't expect to be back in Saskatchewan at this time, but I'm really happy that I am now. But yeah, I have a son, Luke, and I have my son Luke with my ex-wife Chelsea, and Chelsea and her new husband, who's an RCMP officer, he was transferred to Saskatchewan. So in order for me to be a part of my son's life, it involved moving here, which was a pretty hard thing to accept at first. But now that we're here, it's actually Luke is really thriving, and I'm realizing that the community that I had growing up, like just the kids and the community is really awesome, and he's really thriving. And so I'm happy to be back in Saskatchewan. My wife, it's more challenging for her because she's from Southeast Asia, and she has never experienced the Canadian winter before. She spent most of her life down in the US in warmer climates, and so it's been really hard on her. We got through the winter. We arrived on December the 1st, which was a really hard time to be introduced to the province. We got through the winter, and we've actually created this company together, Creative Project Partners, and she's been such a help creating this company because it's really something that I've always wanted to do. I've always had my company, which is Grunert Imaging, and it was always me, just me, and it was me and my camera, and it was like Kris's portfolio, and he's who we're hiring. And I'm really excited about Creative Project Partners, just kind of taking myself out of the equation a little bit, and also servicing clients in a bigger way than what I was able to do on just by myself. Because I've noticed companies, they have like a bigger need for photography than ever. With that comes like a lot of responsibility too for them, like to create a library of images that are that's cohesive and that gets used effectively, and also just managed in general. So Creative Project Partners is this bigger thing that allows us to service clients, not just me, but also bring in so many other people that I've met along these 20 years, different designers, writers, and other photographers, videographers, drone pilots, basically whatever's needed. I've developed different relationships over the last 20 years to help service clients. And I'm also really excited about the digital asset management part of it, which is way more technical, but just helping clients like actually manage their photographs, because even some quite large companies have a hard time doing that. Things get lost and they don't realize what they even have. And so, yeah, we're using some really cutting edge software to help manage that for companies. So now that we're here in Regina, I'm really excited to work with more Saskatchewan-based companies. I think for a long time, I was like, always kind of had this thing of like, yeah, wanting to work with, companies in other places. And I don't know what it is, if it's just like the collective consciousness or just me getting older, but I don't know. I'm just not really interested in that as much anymore. I'm really interested in working with companies that are just around us and here on the prairies, and realizing that, wow, like there's actually a lot of really, really incredible things that are happening here in the industrial sector, and in science and agriculture and technology. That's really interesting. So I'm just starting now to start, marketing to these companies and starting to get our first contracts. So it's really exciting. For me, it's so obvious that people that are here or grow up here, that there is this general appreciation or connection to society or the people around them. In bigger cities, it's hard to find that connection. There's a comfort that's not there that makes it hard, to meet somebody new or to develop a new friendship in a bigger city. In Vancouver in particular is challenging, and maybe more challenging than Toronto for some reason. But here people are just really nice, and they have this sort of awareness and understanding of things that it's really hard to articulate, but makes life easier and more joyful, really.
I suppose you have the advantages that you had already. I mean, you've developed your business, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
where
really.
you are.
It doesn't really.
When you bring your portfolios and your client list with you,
yeah,
they don't really care where you are. Like you said, you can fly anywhere, and you only have to get to Regina Airport an hour before.
Yeah, I love that. It only takes me 5 or 10 minutes to get to the airport. And yeah, I only need to get there an hour ahead, and then I'm wherever.
When you're talking to a photographer, there's obviously one other question that has to be asked. Everybody's now a photographer because everybody has a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Hasselblad. My phone has a Hasselblad camera.
Oh, yeah? Awesome.
But not all cell phone users are photographers. What do you say when somebody says, how do I take a good photograph on my phone? Is there any advice from your experience?
It's been amazing, right? Because I've been doing this for 25 years now, or actually more, count those college years. So I have seen the evolution of photography, this whole time, and how it's, wow. I guess it was social media that really, well, and obviously the phone technology. The amount of images created now in any one day is just like, it's an uncomprehendable number that's equivalent to probably a century or whatever from, in one day. I mean, I like to be optimistic. I think that it is amazing that people do have the tool, like the camera with them at all times. I do feel like it is an opportunity to connect with the world around you and the people around you. It's a really fine line, I think, because we've built this. It's almost like a visual language, I guess, is what we've developed, with photography. Like, we're using as a way to communicate, just like in a similar way as words have evolved. Yeah, everybody's a photographer now. I guess my advice would be, though, like to just slow down, and before you take that photograph, look at the scene, maybe try to access other of those senses, even if it's your smell or your hearing, because that will create developing that connection between you and the subject, whatever it is, will make a better photograph, as opposed to just pulling it out of your pocket and taking a picture really quickly, or being at a concert and viewing the concert through the phone or whatever. Like, it can be this tool to actually create really a disconnection between you and the subject, and then also you and the world. Or it could actually be used as a tool for connection. That would be my advice, is for people to really just slow down and take a moment before taking the picture, and just, if it's a person, a loved one, a family member, a group shot, like, just take like 2 seconds and just look at them and just appreciate them for that little moment before you take the photograph. And I feel like that will make the photograph better somehow. Technically, will it change it? Probably not, but I think there's some sort of magic there. That was a nice thing about being able to start in those early days with film, and I would go out and explore these places, and I wouldn't get to see the photographs right away. It would take at least 24 hours to see the photographs, if not maybe 3 days. That totally changes the whole process. That would be an interesting exercise for people to do as well, like to try to get in the habit of not reviewing your photographs right away. Just focus on taking the picture, and maybe review them later that night or the next day or something. It's really hard to do when it pops up in front of you, but there is a bit of a resurgence in this way of thinking of film photography. And I think there's an app I heard about recently, and I don't even know the name of it, but where that's what it'll do. You'll take pictures, and it will essentially kind of lock them up for you for like a day before you can see them. I think that's great, because in that time, your mind has time to, I don't know, process the experience or the moment. And when you come back to it, more of a connection and appreciation. So yeah, having that time in between taking the picture and the final picture. And sometimes, honestly, like, sometimes 24 hours isn't enough. Like, this sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not. Like I've gone back to photos, like some of these like really more personal type photographs, these landscapes that I've done in the desert and stuff. I've gone back to them like 3 or 4 months later and found aspects of it that I didn't see then. And then it actually completely changed the outcome in the end. 24 hours is great. You know, sometimes going back to pictures much later is even better.
All our previous podcasts about Yorkton then and Yorkton now can all be heard at yorktonstories.ca, where we also provide more information in case you want to drill down a little deeper into the stories we present. You can also sign up for our email list so we can let you know when a new episode is available, and you can support us with a donation if you wish to help defer the cost of the technology that makes these podcasts possible. Thanks again to Harvest Meats and Grain Millers for their support. Your comments and suggestions are always welcome. Get in touch through our website or by emailing Dick, D-I-C-K, at yorktonstories.ca. We look forward to having you join us again.